Okay, well, welcome everyone to our second virtual lunch talk. Thanks so much, Gina, for doing this, for working with the technology, and for giving the students and all of us something to keep thinking about in such a tough time where every day is sort of new emotionally and in terms of what we're kind of all going through. Gina Rodríguez-Drix is the Cultural Affairs Manager in the City of Providence's Department of Arts, Culture, and Tourism. She manages the ACT Public Art Program, facilitates creative placemaking projects, and develops cultural policy. She served as project manager for the Art in City Life Plan, the city's first master plan for public art, and currently stewards the planning process for Creative Providence 2020, the city's second cultural plan. Gina is also a multi-genre writer and birth doula and graduated from Brown with a degree in Africana Studies. Her talk today is titled The Providence Art in City Life Plan. So what I did for chat is I made it so that everyone can only chat to me, and what you can use chat for is to kind of record questions as we go. And when Gina is done, then I can sort of, read through the scroll and invite people to ask Gina their question for the last half of the lunch talk. And if you have anything too that you want the group to see, a link to a project or something that Gina's talking about that spurs you to want to share something with everyone, you can send that to me and I can also send that out to everyone as well. So thank you so much, Gina. I'll turn it over to you and really appreciate you doing this today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here, or wherever you are. I'm sure you're all spread out now and not on campus, but it's a crazy time we're in. So here to talk about public art. Like Marissa said, I'm with the City of Providence and the Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism. Oh, are you not gonna let me switch slides? There we go. And we started our public art program a few years back in 2016 when our current mayor, Mayor Lorza, established the Art and City Life Commission. So we had a fun ordinance on the books since 1980. So this thing is older than I am. And we were frankly incompliant until 2016 without having a commission to work to create public art and have works associated in the public realm that were publicly funded. So in 2016, Mayor Lorza established the Art and City Life Commission and said, here we go, here we have a public body, let's get some art out there. And our department was charged with staffing this commission, and we all sat around a table and we were like, well, we don't have a budget yet and we don't really know quite yet what we're doing. So we knew we needed to go into a public art master planning process in order to have a sense of what our residents and visitors wanted to see in the public realm, and have to develop a standard process for commissioning that work that was really grounded in a democratic and transparent process, and wasn't sort of what we had had previously, where our department had often funded public art projects, mostly temporary works that were privately funded through grants. But they were, works that we were selecting on our own that didn't have a lot of public involvement in terms of the decision making and the competitive call process. Or we had a lot of works going into the public realm that were sort of pay to play. So if you had enough resources available to develop a public work, you would piecemeal permissions together, and it kind of just worked that way. So we do have a history of having public art in Providence, but we didn't have a plan in place to make sure that how those works were selected and put into the public realm was grounded in a transparent process. So we went through a public art master planning year with a consultant firm called Via Partnership LLP with Eliza Schiff, who's a graduate of the JNBC program. So she was a huge part of helping us develop our Art and City Life plan. And you can see here, this is sort of a crude little drawing of what this looked like, but we had designed our planning process with several groups that were working on different components. So we had our team at the department. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'll just spin it around in case you can. We developed an advisory committee that was really like a group of, sort of higher end stakeholders in the public realm, different nonprofit organizations that were already doing public art, folks in public service, some elected officials, some granting arts agencies. We had our consultant firm. We developed a city working group. So this was essentially a group of city staff that would touch public art projects. So everything from inspections and standards to Parks Department, historic preservation, Downtown Design Commission staff, anybody who would eventually have to touch a public art project was involved in sort of helping us develop the plan. So we realized that a lot of what we're doing in our department is also not only educating our residents and supporting our residents to get public art, throughout the city, in our neighborhoods, in our downtown, but also helping our sister departments understand what public art is, and understand the artistic process and understand ways of supporting those residents. So we wanted to make sure that our colleagues were involved in developing our public art master plan. We had some focus groups, namely a youth focus group and a focus group for public artists. We also did intercept surveys and an online survey. So we had multiple ways of having some touch points, and we had some larger community meetings as well. So all of the learnings were funneled into the development of the plan. The Art and City Life Plan then developed new policies. So we really looked at that 1980 ordinance around the % for art allocation, which we had in the books but had not been yet allocated or activated. We looked at how to develop a standardized review and commissioning process. We developed recommendations for a special committee for commemorative projects. So in a lot of our meetings and in our surveys, questions about monuments, memorials came up. And so we really wanted to hold space for those conversations, but realized that that would need a separate planning process in and of itself, because this is like a bit of nuance between public art and commemorative work. Albeit some similar things in terms of permissions. So we made sure that there was some seeding of policy work happening in our Art and City Life Plan so that we can move forward in developing more policy on commemorative works. We also talked about conservation and maintenance. A lot of the public art that we already had in the city, think of things like the R-Line bus stops, which were funded through a HUD study in, I believe it was like 2013, 2014. A lot of those have come offline because we did not plan for maintenance and conservation. So we really are trying to figure out how to establish a public fund dealing with the municipal nonsense around fiscal years and, there's a whole thing, but trying to make sure that we have dollars for maintenance and conservation especially for our long-term works and our permanent works. So that's in development. And of course, the public art plan touched individual artists, arts organizations, community partners, partner agencies with the city, arts funders, the mayor's office, and city council. And so now that we have our public art program in place, we're continuing ongoing conversations and partnerships with all of those stakeholders as we've moved forward in the last 2 years with our public art program. So we now have, our plan was launched in April of 2018, which launched the ACT Public Art Program. So this the new program that we have, it's the first public art program that the city has had. And we commission and maintain a diverse collection of permanent and temporary works. We are serving as a resource for other entities in developing public art, both in the private sector, nonprofit sector, and in supporting our sister agencies here at the city. We are working to promote our community's access to and appreciation of public art, and really constantly fostering new partnerships locally, nationally, to develop works and to fund those works. So here's what our Art and City Life Plan has taught us how to do as a city. We now develop an annual work plan. So we work through our budgetary season, And then in July, once the budget passes, we bring to the Art and City Life Commission an annual work plan. And the annual work plan has a list of projects that we want to activate throughout the year across the 4 program trajectories that you see here. So landmark public artworks, which are soon coming online. They are large scale works in the downtown or neighborhood. So this is like the Providence version of like the Bean. This is that's what we mean by the landmark public artworks. Public art residencies, I'll talk about what we've been able to do so far, but we've actually activated several in different city agencies, putting individual artists or artist teams embedded in community spaces. Civic infrastructure projects. So these are projects that are connected to the public infrastructure. So doing poetry on sidewalks, which is a project that's coming online. Arts integrated bike racks, things that are permanent projects but are embedded in the actual landscape of the city. And of course, temporary projects like the one you see here, Sign In from Area C Projects, which was commissioned for PVD Fest last year. So our annual work plan has a set of projects that we're going to do across each trajectory and outlines the standard commissioning process for each of those. So we are now issuing competitive calls for art on cafe.org. And this is really helpful in helping our local independent artists professionalize using a system like Cafe. These artists a lot of our artists who were not really getting work outside of the city or the state are now seeing all of the calls nationally and are starting to apply. So by encouraging our local artists to learn how to use that platform, it's creating, a mechanism whereby they're learning of and applying for calls that they might not have seen before. We're doing a lot of art info sessions with each of our competitive calls to make sure that artists are familiar with how to join into that system to register, and are really doing a lot of hand-holding to support them along the way, which is great. So our standard commissioning process involves a competitive call and our info session to support artists and answer questions. We have individual art selection panels per project, which then select finalists. The finalists either come in for an interview or to show a design proposal. Once they are selected, that recommendation from the panel goes to the Art and City Life Commission, which then approves. So really, we have separated ourselves from the decision-making process. We are now facilitating a very public, transparent process for selecting artists and the works. And our staff is no longer at the head of those decisions, which is how it should be when we're working in public service. It really shouldn't be our choice. So in the first year, we activated 3 of the 4 trajectories. We had public art at PVD Fest, 3 individual projects across different sites. We had residencies at both the Providence City Archives and at Rogers Recreation. I'll show you a little bit of that work. We activated the public art ideas competition. So we did an open competition to individual artists. It was our biggest call yet. We had almost 70 applicants for that and 4 awards. And those are for projects that would last between 6 months and 24 months in the public realm. And then we did a civic infrastructure project, but it was temporary along the Woonasquatucket River Greenway. So this was through an NEA funded project along the Woonasquatucket. It was a year-long creative placemaking initiative with a variety of partners, but we did temporary works for both animal habitats along the river and temporary art projects. So in our temporary projects category, we will every year have public art at PVD Fest. That's part of the plan. So every year so far, they've been raised to $10,000 awards. There are 3 project sites: the City Hall Apron, Empire Plaza, and Washington Street Garage Facade. These are temporary exhibitions that go from June through November every year. And they are open to the Providence metro area. So this is state of Rhode Island plus Bristol County, Massachusetts. So we can get Fall River, New Bedford, and Attleboro area into those calls. This here is knit, was up on the garage last year, created by Newhouse. It was a really beautiful textile design. This covered the entire garage facade on Washington Street, and at night had these great LED lights, and they programmed it so it had different colors throughout the year. It was just like throughout the exhibition. It was really cool. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Public Art Ideas Competition, we had 4 artists who had been selected. Those projects, while they've been awarded, they are not online, so I don't have pictures of them yet. There's 2 projects that are starting now, and the other 2 will be in the fall. And these are temporary projects that will be up to 2 years, and they include a billboard mural on a recreation center, an intersection mural painting in South Providence. There'll be a photo banner project and also a very large community loom in a park. So very different projects came out of that ideas competition and across different neighborhoods in the city. It's really neat. These are our public art artists in residence from the first year. Anna Snyder and Lindsay Montanari were the artists in residence at City Archives and explored, the prompt was colonial Providence. And so they did really interesting work looking at both the documents at City Hall and documents at the Tomahawk Museum, and had a European and indigenous perspectives on the colonial period in Providence. And then Isanel Torres, who was our 2019 artist in residence at Rogers Recreation Center, who did a mural on the entire exterior facade of the rec center, and also worked with kids to co-design that mural. So this was the poster from the gallery reception of Lindsay and Anna's work. I believe that work is still up because City Hall is closed. If there's some magical way that you can get in, the work is still up. It was a really beautiful show. And they worked with documents that really looked at how land was divided in the colonial period, and looked at this here is a copy of the Providence deed, which is going on permanent display in City Hall. There are some pieces from both Anna and Lindsay's work that will be alongside that deed once it goes on permanent display, that will also be on permanent display in City Hall. So we will have this very provocative response, permanently associated with the deed to the city. So this is a picture of the mural that Isanel completed. It's really close up, so you can't really see, but this covered the entire facade of the rec center. And this is a portrait of Madeline Rogers, who the center is named after. We also this year were able to launch a Creative Community Health Worker Fellowship program. So these are our community health workers in training right now. They are 5 local artists and healers: Anthony Andrade, who is a yoga teacher, also a dancer, choreographer, and media artist; Magnolia Perez, who does theater work with the Manhattan Avenue Project; Rafini, longtime member of the Rhode Island Black Storytellers and theater artist; Sata Jala, who is primarily a poet, but also does multimedia work and is a birth doula; and Susi Santana, who is a fantastic local poet and also works as an interpreter. These 5 artists were selected for this program that was a really neat way that we were able to combine an existing creative placemaking project funded by the Kresge Foundation, where we've been doing work at the intersection of health, food, economic development, and health in Upper South Providence and the West End. So for the last 3 years, we have been working in that neighborhood to really develop arts integrated farmers markets. We were working with community partners like the Southside Cultural Center, West Elmwood Housing Development Corporation, and the African Alliance, which does support for majority West African refugees who are here now and are doing urban farming. And so we had been working with them for 3 years at this intersection. And we were working with 2 poets, Vadik Kumba and Laura Brown Lavoie, and they were acting as our artist facilitators for that creative placemaking project. So we've been really working closely with those artists for 3 years. And over the course of that 3-year period, we really wanted to lean into the learnings from what it means to be an artist facilitator. Laura and Vadik have done such an incredible work at holding space and moving, keeping up momentum in a partnership, and leveraging power and sort of making the those that are here from the capital C city in the room, really at an equal playing field with our partners. We did participatory budgeting through that grant process because we had poets at the helm. And so we wanted to really think about what it would mean to have a training that trained artists that are already working in the public realm as artist facilitators, and really honing in on those skills that artists often bring, that sense of ability to read a room, to experiment, to lean into messiness and to make something out of it, to understand negative space, to manage conflict, and to really like imagine a new way of being. So we wanted to figure out how do we codify that and train artists into this thing called artist facilitation. At the same time working in that project, we really started deeply learning about and believing in the work of community health workers. And so working with our sister agency, the Healthy Communities Office, and our artists, we came up with this fellowship. So I know this is like long-winded, but we had this creative placemaking project plus our public art program, combined them to create this fellowship. So now these 5 artists are right now being trained in by our artist facilitators and a community health worker organization called Community Health Innovations of Rhode Island. They're getting 45 hours of core competencies in community health work and 27 hours in developing artist facilitation. And together, that training will lead them towards a small residency. Each of these artists are going to be placed in the summer at a community. There's 5 sites. There's a community library, the West End Recreation Center, the African Alliance, our community partner on this project, West Elmwood Housing, and I'm losing the 5th, St. Martin de Porres Senior Center. So we have 5 artists, 5 community agencies, and these artists are going to be trained as both facilitators and community health workers embedded. The idea behind combining this privately funded creative placemaking project with the public art program that would fund the residency component is to really experiment with how the city might be able to create a pipeline in the civic commons for this type of work. This was also, of course, created in mind, paying attention to social determinants of health, paying attention to these particular neighborhoods. And this was, of course, pre the coronavirus pandemic. So we're really feeling like this program in particular has a whole new weight in terms of thinking about how we embed artists in city agencies and in the civic commons, and what that means for the overall wellness of our communities. So you can clearly see that I really love that project, so I'll talk about that forever. I'll move on. Another thing that came out of the Art and City Life Plan was finally we were able to take a look at that percent for art allocation. So along with that 1980 ordinance, we did have a 1% allocation on the books since 1980, pre-moving the river, which unfortunately it wasn't activated at that time. But really, we were supposed to have funding for public art with any capital project that was going into play. We did not have that until this past year. So because we, under the Alorza administration, finally got an Art and City Life Commission, and then had a master plan which defined what we wanted to do with this percent for art allocation, we were able to use this list of uses for percent for art to do the internal work, both with the administration and city council, to be at the table for capital improvement planning. And so because of that, we now have a little over $1 million for public art so that we can actually get a landmark public artwork in place and do some neat civic infrastructure projects. So it was a huge win for our department and for the public art community in Providence to finally have this in compliance. So again, just as a review of the timeline here, 2016 had the commission, 2018 the plan, 2019 the proposal for percent for art went before council, and now we have approved projects online. So stay tuned there. The other policy win that we had through this was the Special Committee for Commemorative Works. So that also went through development in the fall of 2018 fall of 2018, with Emma Bost, who's a recent JNVC grad. She came on and helped us develop that policy. It's now been supported by 5 city council members and is in the ordinance committee. As soon as that passes, we will have an additional committee to staff, which is a special committee for commemorative works, where we have developed policies for the to review for social cultural merit for new works, for new proposals, and also any changes, relocations, or decommissions of commemorative works. So we anticipate a lot of robust, challenging, awesome conversations around, frankly, like the statues of like colonial white men that we have all around the city. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens now that we have the structure for a committee to actually review this and have it not be the city's decision. As we know, a lot of commemorative works in general are, again, pay to play. So what we have in the public realm were considered gifts or loans to the city that, you know, folks with the resources to put them up, gifted, and then the public entities accepted, and then have not been able to maintain. And so we have these monuments all over the place that need both care and also rethinking in 2020 and what it means to have physical structures like this in the public realm. So we'll have a committee in place to take care of that, which is cool. And then lastly, we developed a public art registration process for any projects that we are not commissioning actively, but folks in the community want to put online in public space. So we have a registration process now for work that is going both on private or public property. And we're now the touch point across the city for any public art. So even if it's on private property, it has to come to us so we know about it and make sure that no other commissions need to touch it. Sometimes that is the case. So this is just an example of a project. This is from artist Elijah Ferris, who did a mural on the Cypress Street Bridge. This was his design. This is a copy. This is a picture of, it's very close up again, so it's hard to see it. It's honoring the celebrity club that used to be on the East Side way back when. A bunch of amazing artists, as you can see, had played there. So that's what I got. Looking forward to see if anybody has any questions. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Gina. Thanks a lot. Okay, it looks like Hannah's got the first question. And so why doesn't actually everyone too, if people are on, if they don't mind putting the video screen on, that might be a nice way for Gina to be able to see who else is on the call and make it a little bit more IRL as much as we can. But Hannah, you're up first.
Hi, I'm coming to you from my kitchen, so sorry if you're hearing food prep noises, but yeah, you know, I'm sure everyone is excited about this, your community health worker program. I'm just really curious to hear a little bit more about where that came from pre-pandemic, you know, how you identified that priority and advocated for it with city government. And then, yeah, I'd like to know how this moment is really, you know, shaping what you're imagining for that program, if it is changing your thinking there, and yeah, how you plan to share this work with other communities and governments that might be looking to replicate something similar.
Yeah, so that program was seeded by a creative placemaking project that we had in place since 2016. So the funder is the Kresge Foundation. So they had initiated this thing called the Fresh Low Initiative. It's like fresh low, fresh, local, and equitable. They were combining their health and arts and culture offices at the Kresge Foundation to come up with this. So it was their first sort of like cross-sector application. They got the highest applicant pool that they had ever seen in their national calls, which really showed them, they were onto something here in terms of this cross-sector collaboration. We actually applied in a similar way. It was the Art, Culture, and Tourism Department with the Healthy Communities Office at the city. So we were thinking this was a good chance for us to combine forces for the first time, also as departments. So we've been heavily in conversations around social determinants of health, health equity. There's also a time in the city and in the state through the Rhode Island Department of Health where these conversations have been happening. So they have, through the Department of Health, these health equity zones. I don't know if anyone's familiar with, but they've been doing not creative placemaking, but place-based health equity work now since around the same time, 2015, 2016. So this sort of thing was emerging. At the same time, that mural from Elijah Ferris that I just showed, that in 2016 also, we were working with the Community Health Innovations of Rhode Island to develop the first rendition of that mural. So we were familiar with Dr. Danny Ritchie's work in creating community health workers as a workforce. And the Healthy Communities Office had also worked with them too. So it was just like multiple layers of conversations that were sort of emerging in different pockets that kind of came together as we were developing this. And truthfully, our Freshlow work with the Kresge Foundation was supposed to sunset last October. And in July, the Kresge Foundation wrote, we are the only municipality in the cohort of 23 projects across the country. Everybody else is pretty grassroots oriented. They reached out to all of us and said, if you want more funding, do you want to apply for an additional year? And we were like, yeah, we want more funding because we can't do this with public funding. So we applied and got some more money to do it. And so we just sort of, we were working with the same artist facilitators and with the same community partners, but we are just taking a slightly different route. And I think kind of like going further upstream and towards the root of social determinants of health by looking at the ways artists can be involved in well-being. In terms of like the sharing out, we're really hoping, but this is a pilot program. So it's like the Kresge Foundation dollars are paying for the training. The public art program is paying for the residency. After they're done with the residency, these 5 folks will submit for certification at the Rhode Island Department of Health. And the idea is because we see the value of arts facilitators, the state sees the value of community health workers, neither has a pipeline. And so the idea is if we can take the learnings from this pilot program, the idea, at least for now, is that the city become the pipeline. So even if it's our artist in residency program, if we are embedding a creative community health worker in every recreation center, that's the part that we can control. That's where we have site control. So that's, something that we can do. In terms of reporting out, we're also working on the cultural plan, which in this weird, like cosmic way, every time we're working towards like pushing that forward, just our department's capacity kept just getting thrown in the air in a different way. And I almost feel like now that we're in this pandemic, it was because we were supposed to have this experience. And I know that might sound like really hippy dippy and nuts, but we're looking at the cultural plan and looking at our previous goals for the creative sector as a whole. And over the last year have, because of this project and other things that are kind of in the ether, been really thinking about art and well-being as a goal area. It's also kind of like just like a passion of mine, but to really think about the connections with artists and creatives in crisis management around crisis management, mitigation for climate resilience, and examining and finding solutions to social determinants of health. And so we had come up with this art and well-being goal area to really deeply explore these conversations. And now here we are. So in terms of the reporting out, there'll be a pilot program and the learnings that come out of this program. There'll be, through our cultural plan, a lot of strategic conversations around this connection of art and well-being. And then because we're supported by the Kresge Foundation, we have been having a lot of support in terms of national sort of reach on this project. And yeah, I did see yesterday that Our Place America was looking at trying to find resources to support artists that are working at the intersection of health, especially in this moment. So I think we just we were already having the conversation and then this hit. So it just makes it just elevated it,
I see Susan has mastered the little blue raise your hand icon. Can you see that, Gina?
No.
Oh, you can't see it, only I can?
Where do you see that?
If you see, do you see the sort of lineup of people who are on this call? Do you see the video, no? I'm
I
just
see.
wondering.
I see everybody's screen, but I don't see everybody's
I
You
think
just
only the host may.
Only
I
the
see it in the
gets to see
host.
the blue hand. Okay, actually, Susan, do you mind? I know you have a question, but could you tell everyone how to raise their little blue hand who has a question?
It's under participants. If you click on that, you'll see it.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Now I clicked on it. Now I can see. Oh, that's so
Okay.
cool.
All right,
Neat.
go for it.
Oh, well, I was actually gonna, you touched on this, Gina, but I was just gonna ask if you saw further, who do you think is gonna start looking for funding to fund things? I mean, you've got such a good start on it. I would think you'd want to, I don't know, apply for a big grant and hire a couple of the students to work on this, because it seems, so perfect. You're just so perfectly positioned to apply for more funding. And this seems like the moment. So I wondered if Art Place, or who do you think is going to come up with some funding?
Yeah, right now we're looking at Art Place in Kresge. And by right now, I literally mean like I had a conversation with my boss yesterday, who said let's look at Art Place. It's definitely something that's going to need private funding attached to it. And I think long term would probably not be something in terms of creating a pipeline that would like necessarily live with the city, just because of our bureaucratic processes. So I think like the pieces that we can control are the civic commons, schools, recreation centers, buildings that we own. But if we are going to be consistently in placing folks in other organizations, we would need private funding attached to that. So yeah, I think definitely we're going to be talking to Kresge and to Art Place. Do you have any ideas for? Does anybody else?
No, I don't know. I mean, we can. Rebecca knows more than I do about what foundations are doing these days, but it occurs to me that you might want to have projects ready. So I wondered if you had any that you were thinking of, given the changed world.
Yeah, not yet. I mean, it's tricky business, given that we're the art, culture, and tourism department. We are in part funded by the hotel tax, and the hotels are closed. And so, the thing that you're seeing with individual artists who are like going gig to gig and have their survival job attached to bartending, and having both industries very quickly just deflate, is probably going to have ramifications for us as well. And so, yeah, I don't know what's ahead of us come the next fiscal year, which is why we need private funding.
Right. It seems like this is the moment to.
Hey,
but you've done that. More questions?
Gina, I had a question. I mean, everything you presented it seems just like huge growth in terms of not just the number of projects, but the ambition of the projects, the first attempt to really think comprehensively about all of the work that the department does. And does that sort of track with a huge budget increase or staff increase, or how were you able to be doing that kind of the scope of thinking and also the depth of thinking that you guys have been doing over the last few years?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that. It definitely felt like a huge learning curve, and then 0 to 60. And to answer your question, it came with a budget increase and not a staff increase. So that was fun. It's great. It's interesting. Our public art master planning consultants, who we still have on retainer, occasionally for like small projects or small pieces, they've been super supportive. They said that a lot of municipalities, what they usually see is that there's money for staff but not for projects, and we've just, in a very Providence way, had the opposite, where we had, like people really believe in the power of art, and the administration and council are like, yeah, no, do it, here's some money for it, but not really understanding the back end and the administrative piece in terms of like, the more projects means more artists, means more admin. So I think we just have a really solid team and kind of a work ethic at Art Culture Tourism that's like, yeah, go for it. We'll figure it out. And so that's kind of like how we roll. We were fortunate to get the increase, and we're really fortunate to get the capital improvement in the % for art in place, because now we can do permanent works, which is really exciting. Yeah, we'll see how it. We've also been like pretty good at getting the private funding, knock on wood. We'll see how things change given where we're at now. It's interesting when thinking about the cultural plan. The cultural plan 10 years ago came at the heels of the financial crisis. And now this one that was in development is going to be coming out, going to be published at the heels of this pandemic. So everything happens for a reason. I guess you just have to adapt.
Yeah, thanks. I see also Deborah Krieger's got her hand up.
Hi. So it seems like my question is sort of what happens when the government sort of changes hands, if the government changes hands? Because I know that, the mayor has to get reelected, people have to get reelected. So what kind of contingencies can you sort of build in, like if another party with different priorities gets elected?
That's a great question. Yeah, I've learned like the importance of policy and ordinances. So, like our department also, we are considered part of the administration. We're not in the town charter. So any mayor at any time, especially for budgetary reasons, could get rid of the entire art, culture, and tourism department. We're not parks or DPW that, has to be there. So the power of having the ordinance in place and the art and city life plan, the plan is now written into the ordinance, so that can never go away. There has to be a commission. The plan is good for 5 years, and there needs to be someone who reintroduces the plan for the next 5 years. So it'll be under the auspices of the commission. Now, if we are no longer there in the department, or if the department doesn't exist and that falls to somebody else, we just have to kind of like hope that the appointees of the commission are solid. But we do have, there have to be people that are appointed by the mayor and also by city council and by city staff, I believe. So there's a good mix there. But really and that's another reason why we really wanted to move quickly on the special committee for commemorative works, especially. It was such a huge national conversation for a while on what to do with markers and memorials in public space. So we wanted to make sure that there was a policy on the books and a committee established as soon as possible for that very reason. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions, group? I think that's it. I think we all as a group successfully also got through our first virtual lunch talks near crisis. So that was good. Thank you, Gina, for doing this. Well, if anyone has questions for Gina or wants to be in touch, I'm sure. Yeah, Susan, sorry, you've got a yellow hand. What does the yellow hand mean? Just clapping. Okay. That's a good one. I like that. Okay. All right, great. All right, thanks, Gina, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good day.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.